And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas, gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today's July the 14th, the 195th day of this year. It's also recognized as Bastille Day, France's national holiday. It's International Non-Binary Peoples Day. Shark around this day. For those that are not familiar with Bastille Day, that was the day the storming of the Bastille took place. Citizens in Paris stormed the Bastille prison, marking a pivotal catalyst in the French Revolution. Celebrated primarily in France and its overseas territories, has military parades and fireworks, especially at the Eiffel Tower, concerts and public balls. There's only 170 days left in this year. It's almost over with, and we'll start a new one, 2027. Well, on that note, let's see what stories we have in the news, because there's always something going on. Well, President Trump has issued a warning about what Iran's going to face next. Says the U.S. is ready to hit Iran very hard as tensions escalate over the Strait of Hormuz. He also said the U.S. will charge a 20% fee on cargo moving through the Strait of Hormuz while reinstating a blockade on Iranian ports. CENTCOM, Central Command, said the U.S. forces resume a naval blockade against Iran today at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Iran's foreign minister mocked Trump's proposed Hormuz fee, saying Iran has always been the guardian of the strait. Renewed fighting comes after Iran claimed the Strait of Hormuz was closed and the U.S. launched strikes on Iranian military targets. A family was shattered after a three-time deported illegal immigrant allegedly blew through a stop sign. A sprawling 25-county congressional district, more than 2,000 miles from the Mexican border, was thrust into the national immigration spotlight this month. That was after a 6-year-old girl was killed in a crash allegedly caused by a three-time deported illegal immigrant with a history of driving while intoxicated. Economy usually dominates politics in North Carolina's 1st Congressional District, which consistently ranks among the nation's poorest districts by poverty rate. That changed after 6-year-old Kelly Toller was pronounced dead after a wreck allegedly caused by Mexican national Jaime Santiago Corona at a stop sign west of Vanceboro last week, just a mile from the district line. The illegal immigration crisis has been hitting home in North Carolina. You saw fentanyl dealers being caught. You saw terrorists being caught, according to Lori Burke out of Edmonton, a retired Iraq War battalion commander and Republican candidate seeking a rematch against incumbent Democratic Representative Don Davis of Snow Hill, what's now a slightly Republican-leaning, formerly Democratic-leaning swing district. Well, the illegal immigration is going to be continue to be an issue no matter which way you look at it. So many came in under the Biden administration. It's really hard not to find them. Well, Democrats' affordability scam collapses in states they actually run. Democrats are lying to voters, claiming to be the party that can deliver affordability, and nothing can be further from the truth. In January, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Shut It Down Schumer promised the nation that the Democrats captured a majority in the Senate, lowering costs to be our North Star. February, the chair of the House New Democratic Coalition rolled out its affordability agenda, proclaiming that's why we're committed to taking on the cost of living crisis to make it easier for people to afford their home, pay for health care, keep the lights on, and build a better future. Well, where were these inflation hawks during the Joe Biden 4 years in the White House when the consumer price index soared above 9%, the highest in more than 40 years? Cost of living rose more than 20%. After winning New York City's Democratic mayoral primary last year, Zoran Mondami claimed we won because New Yorkers have stood up for a city they can afford. He didn't mention Democrats have been in charge of New York for decades, helping make the city unaffordable. We lived there for a while. Some of the costs were absolutely, literally unbelievable. After our last year living there, the city tax we'd been charged was almost $10,000. Well, Stephen Miller's unlikely friendship with Lindsey Graham revealed in a heartfelt White House tribute. Stephen Miller, a policy advisor for the White House, paid tribute to the late Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, on Monday afternoon, calling him a personal friend. He was of a mold that I don't think we're going to see for a long time, Miller said. It was somebody who really understood how the power of rhetoric, how the power of communication as a senator could actually change outcomes. He really believed you could change people's minds through the force and persuasion of his rhetoric. Well, I don't think we'll see anybody like him for some time. Well, CNBC survey mocked after ranking all red states as top 10 worst places to live. They faced a wave of online mockery Monday after releasing its annual quality of life rankings, but exclusively placed conservative red states in all 10 spots of the worst places to live. Even as official U.S. Census data shows some of those states are leading the nation in population growth. Critics quickly took to social media to call out the outlet for what they alleged was blatant liberal bias embedded in its ranking criteria. Counting down from the 10th worst places to the first, CNBC ranked the bottom 10 states as Arkansas, Oklahoma, Alabama, Missouri, Utah, Georgia, Louisiana, Indiana, Texas, and Tennessee. All 10 states are Republican-led and voted for President Trump in 2024. Well, according to the report, CNBC is placing increasing emphasis on quality of life, one of the 10 categories of competitiveness in our annual America's Top States for Business study. It's our annual ranking of every state's business culture, how it in its 20th year. Under this year's methodology, category makes up 11.6% of the state's overall score, up from 10% last year. To score the states for quality of life, we use hard data like factors like crime rates, air quality, and health care. Also consider the cost and availability of child care, inclusiveness of state laws, and reproductive rights. They didn't say it, but I'm sure that they put a heavy weight on DEI. Well, going to Bonnie Burke, there's a real reason why folks hate Caitlin Clark so much. In a discussion late Friday night on CNN, a panel debated about why so many WNBA players appear to resent Caitlin Clark. Former ESPN host Carrie Champion didn't offer an explanation. Said she argued anybody who suggests race as a factor is disrespecting black women. She suggested it's intentional that people are being racist toward her, leaves out a long history of women who've supported the league and started this league who are black. Very disrespectful to them. But why do so many WNBA players, particularly black players, display such obvious and at times physical hostility toward Clark? Is it simply because she's a straight white woman in a league that's roughly 70% black or LGBTQ? But her identity alone isn't the issue. There's more to it. The problem for many around the league is that Clark refuses to play the role expected of her. She's a straight white woman who has declined to turn herself into a vehicle for the racial and sexual activism that increasingly defies the league's public image. The identity left, if you will, doesn't reject all white people. Many gladly vote for California Governor Gavin I'm Wonderful Newsom for president. They adored Sarah Spain throughout her years covering the WNBA. What they reject is the wrong kind of white person. Most white players in the WNBA have understood the assignment. Cameron Brink is white, blonde, engaged to a man, and looks like a supermodel. She was drafted one pick after Clark in 2024. WNBA establishment practically reveres her. From the beginning of her career, she's followed the script. Before playing in a single WNBA game, she volunteered in acknowledgement of her privilege. Well, why don't we get back to what it was created for, and that's the sport of basketball for females, instead of worrying about all the political aspirations, I guess you could say. Well, President Trump backed daylight savings time bill clears a key House hurdle. A bipartisan push to make daylight savings time permanent is heading for a chamber-wide vote after clearing a key House hurdle. House Rules Committee on Monday teed up a floor vote on the Sunshine Protection Act, which will allow states to enact daylight savings time year-round with an option to opt out. The committee approved the rule in a 6-4 vote. The measure has the support of many coastal lawmakers and President Trump, who's repeatedly urged Congress to make daylight savings time permanent and end the twice-a-year ritual of changing clocks, practice currently observed by every state except Hawaii and most of Arizona. The proponents argued that resetting clocks has negative health impacts, while permanent daylight savings time would boost outdoor recreation, tourism, and economic activity, among other benefits. And it might get folks to work on time. Well, a number of notable figures have died from the same heart condition linked to Lindsey Graham's death. His death has renewed attention on a rare but often deadly cardiovascular emergency known as aortic dissection. Cause of death is identified as an aortic dissection due to arteriosclerosis, cardiovascular disease, according to a statement released by Graham's office on Sunday, citing preliminary findings from the District of Columbia's Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. Occurs when the layers of the aorta, that's the body's largest artery, come apart and everyone tears, according to Fox News senior medical analyst Dr. Mark Siegel, who did not treat Graham. It can come on in minutes or days and may be hard to recognize, he said, noting that while dissections can evolve over time, symptoms can appear suddenly. Well, I don't think we'll see anybody like Graham for a while. GOP leaders race to end conservative revolt as the House floor stays at a standstill. House GOP leaders face a pivotal test today as they try to break a conservative revolt that has paralyzed the House floor for weeks. The rebellion, including several dozen Republicans, have repeatedly forced House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, to pull votes on key legislation, grinding House business to a halt just months before the November midterm elections. Conservatives say they're blocking procedural votes until the Senate passes the Stall Save America Act. House GOP leadership allows a vote on sweeping border security legislation. Now the demand appears close to being met amid GOP divisions, raising questions about whether Johnson can advance any major legislation this week. Well, they've got to have their little party spats, which doesn't do anything for the country, but it makes them look good when they do their interviews with their constituent newspapers. Well, according to Majority Leader Thune, Lindsey Graham was the GOP's glue, binding us together with courage and grace. The tragic and sudden loss of Senator Graham, America's lost one of its greatest patriots, and he said he'd lost a dear friend, and the Republican Party's lost a champion. And much will rightfully be written about Lindsey's strong advocacy on behalf of the U.S. and freedom-loving people around the world. There was no bigger believer in America's role in the world than Graham. In uniform and in Congress, Graham dedicated his life to the mission that America was a singular force for good. Well, the Ramsey financial expert says there's no magic age to claim Social Security. George Camel says the 2032 trust fund deadline is no reason to panic, predicting payroll tax and retirement age tweaks. And there's a bit of anxiety over the projected 2032 depletion of the Social Security Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund. Viral online trend is urging Americans to claim their retirement benefits as early as age 62. The personal finance expert and Ramsey Solutions personality George Kamel pushing back on the internet hysteria, telling Fox News the panic mirrors the toilet paper rush during COVID, warning that filing early out of fear locks in a permanent pay cut, not freedom. And that is true. If you file at 62, you don't get as much as you would if you filed at 65 or 70. Well, President Trump's fiercest GOP critic became his most influential voice on war and peace. 2015, Senator Lindsey Graham called Donald Trump a jackass and warned Republicans that nominating him would be a disaster. And Trump responded by reading Graham's personal cell phone number aloud during a campaign rally, encouraging supporters to call the South Carolina senator. Well, a few political rivalries seemed less likely to evolve into one of Washington's most consequential foreign policy partnerships. Trump rose to power, promising to end America's endless wars and challenging decades of Republican foreign policy orthodoxy. Graham, by contrast, remained throughout his 3 decades in public service an unabashed advocate of projecting American power abroad. But over the next decade, Graham became one of the few lawmakers with regular access to Trump on questions of national security, emerging as one of the Republican Party's most influential voices on Iran, Ukraine, Israel, and NATO. He had built his Senate career around foreign policy, and he and Trump found a middle ground where they could agree. And Ukraine warns it lost its closest link to Trump after Graham's sudden death. Well, Prince William's absence speaks volumes as King Charles reunites with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Royal family's icy divide appears to be thawing somewhat, but experts caution rebuilding trust to take much more than a single meeting. On Friday, King Charles III hosted Prince Harry and met with his family for the first time in years as they tried to repair a rift that has persisted since his youngest son and his wife stepped back as senior working royals and moved to California. Harry, along with Meghan Markle and their 2 children, Prince Archie and Princess Elizabeth, met with the monarch and Queen Camilla at the Highgrove House, a country estate west of London, Buckingham Palace confirmed. Fox News Digital reached out to a spokesperson for the palace and the Sussexes for comment. According to British broadcaster photographer Helena Chard, eager Charles has always hoped to see his grandchildren. He's still undergoing treatment for cancer, and family matters more than ever. Despite years of public fallout, he wouldn't pass up the opportunity to privately see his grandchildren. Well, we'll see if they can manage to put it back together. Family squabbles is usually some of the worst. Well, Yellowstone bison attack witness believes the man saved his grandson by taking the brunt of the attack. Grandfather was tossed into the sky by a charging bison at Yellowstone National Park, recovering after suffering multiple broken bones as new details emerge about the terrifying encounter. The victim has been identified as Carl Ison McDaniel, man visiting the park with his grandson when the bull attacked Friday evening at Bidge Bay Campground near Yellowstone Lake, according to several reports. McDaniel is a retiree based in Kendall, Washington, according to reports, known for serving on boards, including the Water and Park Commissions. And now the photographer who took the video of the shocking attack has revealed previously unknown details. He said, "Once I saw the victim in the air, I stopped filming and ran with some other men to haze the bison away and render aid," the photographer, Mark McLeod, told Fox News Digital. "It really felt to me like the grandfather kind of saved his grandson. He'd taken the brunt of the attack. He said, I got to him right away, and the first thing he asked is, 'How's my grandson?' He never lost consciousness during the attack despite suffering multiple broken bones, now recovering from his injuries. When the bison stood up, the grandfather decided to leave immediately, and the grandson followed. For some reason, the bison had it in his head he's going to attack these 2. And A bison attack is something difficult to stop. Well, the robberies and assaults and rapes have spurred new U.S. travel warning for a popular Caribbean getaway. Americans traveling to St. Lucia now face new warnings from the U.S. State Department after officials raised concerns about violent crime on the Caribbean island. The department recently elevated St. Lucia's advisory to level 2. It exercise increased caution, adding a new crime indicator to the warning. Known for its volcanic islands, luxury resorts, and tropical beaches, St. Lucia attracts visitors from around the world every year. Updated advisory warns that violent crime can occur anywhere on the island and says U.S. citizens and other foreign visitors have been victims of armed robbery, assault, burglary, and rape. In some cases, U.S. citizens have been killed, according to the advisory. The State Department's also noted violent crime has affected guests staying at tourist resorts and warned that police response times are not as fast as in the U.S. Beyond violent crimes, officials said that petty theft remains common, particularly in popular tourist areas. Most crime against foreigners are crimes of opportunity, like purse snatching and pickpocketing. Well, everybody, it's like I've been told locally, being a disabled veteran, I was told, disabled veterans are walking ATMs. Well, a lot of American tourists are looked at as walking ATMs by the locals. Well, Tom Cruise unveils a dramatic transformation in the first look at Alejandro Inarritu's highly anticipated Digger. He's making one of his most dramatic transformations of his career. On Monday, Warner Brothers debuted the first trailer for Alejandro Inarritu's highly anticipated film Digger, giving fans a glimpse of the 64-year-old actor in a role unlike anything he's tackled in years. Cruise is playing Digger Rockwell, an eccentric oil magnate whose decisions put the world on the brink of catastrophe, ultimately compelling him to embark on an improbable mission to rescue humanity. According to the film's official synopsis, Cruise's character embarks on a quest to prove he's humanity's hero before the disaster he's unleashed destroys everything. It has the potential to be a good movie. We'll see. United Passenger says the crew ordered him to change a controversial T-shirt before he could travel. New Jersey man says he was forced to change an anti-war T-shirt before boarding a United Airlines flight after a flight attendant deemed the message offensive. Sam Said, London, New Jersey, said he was boarding a June 4th flight but landed at Newark Liberty International Airport while wearing a shirt that said bombing kids is not self-defense. When the United supervisor approached him shortly after he took his seat, according to CBS New York, Sadat told the outlet he was very confused when he was pulled aside. He was like, hey, the flight attendant finds your shirt offensive. And he said, why? And he said, here are the choices. Change your shirt or you can't get on the flight. Well, if you bought a ticket, I would have to say that the flight attendant has no business interfering with your right to travel. But a lot of flight attendants that I've encountered over the years seem to think that they are almost like federal judges, God's anointed. They get to make the decisions and you have to follow like a good little person. Well, we've been talking about a lot of strange things. Spent the last couple of shows talking about time slips. Now we're going to talk about encounters of what you might refer to as the weirdest kind. Well, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin set foot on the moon in 1969, the experience of gravitational attraction was only 1/6 of that of the Earth. That meant despite wearing heavy space suits, they were able to effortlessly leap about the lunar surface. Well, the number of folks who claim to have encountered aliens from other planets, which are larger than the Earth, are apparently able to leap and jump or run at superhuman heights and speeds when they visit this planet. There are a number of stories that support the idea that extraterrestrials are capable of moving around in frighteningly strange ways. One example came from U.S. Air Force Base at Alconbury in the 1970s. Alconbury's in England, don't you know? And the maintenance personnel reported that while waiting on the hard standing area, that's the concrete where the planes park, the cockpit canopy of an F-4 Phantom fighter jet was scratched and attacked by a hairy creature. Was spooked by this strange appearing creature. Security guards at the air base reported they opened fire on a hoofed intruder described as being over 6 feet tall. This hairy creature was described as having an odd-shaped head, large teeth, large ears, and weird, very muscular frog-like legs. Security dubbed him the Leaping Man. Apparently escaped by jumping over 2 15-foot-tall perimeter fences topped with barbed wire, and did it in one giant leap. Mysterious creature also seemed to be bulletproof, as rounds fired were apparently ineffective. And there's been other reports of strange happenings. On Midsummer's Eve in 1998, 2 groups of teenagers began a game of hide-and-seek in a small village of Ballynahinch in County Down. One car full of youngsters drove off and followed 10 minutes later by a second car carrying 5 more teenagers. First car sped off up a lonely back road, and the driver spotted what he thought might be a good hiding place. He reversed the car up a long and winding dirt track flanked by tall hedgerows. The driver then turned off the car lights, and everybody became accustomed to the darkness. Passengers calmed down and simply watched the clouds moving across the full moon. But that tranquility, according to the report, was short-lived. After a couple of minutes, the occupants of the car began to hear the sounds of heavy footfalls galloping toward the rear of the car. Sensing danger and somewhat spooked, the driver cranked up the engine and started to drive back down that lonely track. Then the passengers in the back of the car noticed that the car was being tailed by something. A weird humanoid was then spotted running parallel to the car behind a flanking hedgerow. This mysterious creature was actually pacing the car with ease, which means it was doing it at least 30 miles an hour. And one of the passengers insisted the thing was running upright on 2 muscular legs. It was sandy-colored and had an elongated face and intelligent-looking eyes. Now, how they saw that in the dark is anybody's guess. Well, as the car accelerated, the creature jumped over a 10-foot-tall hedge, flew through the air over the car, and vanished into the darkness. Needless to say, this left the driver and the passengers shell-shocked. In fact, so shell-shocked, they had to visit a local bar for some liquid refreshment. So the question becomes, I guess, do leaping aliens exist? And if they do, where's the evidence? Well, there are videos of strange small humanoids that move in superhuman ways. One such video has been uploaded onto YouTube. Allegedly, this footage was shot after dark using night vision. This short film shows a UFO flying erratically above a remote farm next to a forest. And also in the video, we see a very short gray alien walking awkwardly down the farm track. The creature has a whitish, mostly bald head, long arms, and muscular legs. Then after observing the cameraman for a few minutes, it turns away and jumps some 50 feet into the air, jumping over a barbed wire fence and clearing a farm building in one giant leap. And footage looks somewhat convincing, though of course the jury's still out about it. There are eyewitness reports of encounters with bizarre amorphous alien globs or jelly-like creatures. 2 Swedish men had an encounter with alien blobs in 1958 at Domston near Kristianstad. Stig Rydberg and his friend Hans Gustafsson, driving home late at night on the 20th of December, 1958. As they were passing through some woods, they spotted a bright saucer-shaped object resting on 3 legs. UFO was roughly 15 feet in diameter and 3 feet high. The 2 men stopped their car and got out to investigate the object. They suddenly 4 blobs came out of the craft. 2 men were transfixed and didn't have time to react. Before they knew what was happening, 3 of the blobs bounded over to them. The blobs attached themselves to the men using a strong suction force and began to pull them toward the spaceship. The situation was made even more horrific by the fact that the blobs emitted a strong smelling gas, which the men described as smelling like burned sausage and ether. Terrified, the 2 men put up a fight. Gustafsson clung to a tree, which probably saved his skin. Meanwhile, Lightberg picked up a large branch and stabbed one of the aliens. Well, this broke off the attack and gave Rydberg time to run back to the car. At that point, Rydberg sounded the car's horn, and that loud noise took the blobs by surprise, and they aborted the abduction, ran back to their ship. Gustafsson and Rydberg jumped in their car, hit the gas, and drove away as fast as they could. After leaving the forest and now on the main road, they saw that bright UFO take off and disappear into the night sky. Although both men were badly shaken by their encounter, a medical examination revealed that they were actually unharmed. Another strange encounter took place in 1971 in Palos Verdes, California on August 17th. John Hodges and Pete Rodriguez were about to get inside their car at 2 o'clock in the morning when they spotted a bright light behind some trees on a lonely back road about 4 miles from the ocean. Men spotted what looked to them like 2 disembodied brains lying on the road. Nevertheless, Hodges continued the journey and returned Rodriguez to his home. It was many years later and under hypnosis that the true story came out. Hodges maintained he was taken aboard a UFO, and it was there that he encountered other creatures from which his description must have been tall grays. Apparently, these yellow-eyed, gray-skinned aliens told Hodges they were watching this planet as it had atom bombs, and they were concerned or even suggesting humans were about to wipe themselves out by a nuclear war. Aliens showed Hodges a map where the nuclear annihilations would take place, presumably these would be in some of our major cities. They also told Hodges the brain things are merely translators. Hodges has returned to his car unharmed. One of the most puzzling aspects about the UFOs, the thorny issue, as to how they managed to travel such vast distances to reach us poor, deserving earthlings. Albert Einstein figured out it's not just possible for anything but that has mass to travel faster than the speed of light. We assume that our take on physics holds true throughout the universe. The quandaries led some to propose the notion that advanced races of extraterrestrials may have either gotten around the speed of light barrier, but they've mastered time travel or have a way to jumping dimensions. Now, the interdimensional theory is nothing new. It's put forward by ufologists like Jacques Vallée and retired military Colonel Philip Corso. In his successful book, The Day After Roswell, Corso states that physicist Herman Oberth examined the retrieved spaceship and was of the opinion it was actually capable of sliding from one dimension or space-time to another. Beings can then be traveling to Earth by jumping dimensions. And how this might be achieved isn't known at the present time, but it might include their ability to control or manipulate gravity and maybe warp time and space. String theory provides for the existence of at least 11 dimensions, so it's possible that highly advanced extraterrestrial beings may have mastered the ability to jump or slide into other realities or universes. This isn't so far from being impossible, given that scientists figured that 99% of the matter in the known universe is actually not visible. That's to say, it's composed of what they call dark matter, the composition of which still remains a mystery. Jumping dimensions or traveling through wormholes obviates the need to travel at the speed of light. And there are a number of encounters where the extraterrestrial visitors could have jumped dimensions. Obviously, we have to rely on stories told by abductees and that they were taken to distant planets by an unknown mechanism. One of the stories came from a 40-year-old oil worker named Carl Higdon. The afternoon of October 25th, 1974, he took time off to go elk hunting in Medicine Bow National Park, 40 miles south of his hometown in Rawlins, in Wyoming. Drank a cup of coffee, he put away his thermos, took out his high-powered rifle, and went looking for elk. Well, sometime later, he found what he was looking for, but got much more than he bargained for. Spotted a group of elk, drew a bead on the male, and pulled the trigger. Said his gun made no noise and he was able to see the bullet float through the air and drop to the ground 50 feet away. He said it was as if time itself had slowed down. In another corner of his eye, he caught sight of a mysterious-looking humanoid. He said the thing was 6 feet tall, weighed about 185 pounds, was slim with very long arms, had one normal hand, the other ended in a drill-like shape. The entity was dressed in a black one-piece jumpsuit, had straw-like hair, very long teeth, no ears, small eyes, no eyebrows, had a slit-like mouth, and bizarrely had two antennae protruding from its head. Oddly enough, he said, the creature spoke to Higdon in English and said, "How you doing?" Higdon later said the creature gave him a pill or a tablet, which he swallowed. At that point, now, if an alien gave me something to swallow, I don't think I'd be too enthusiastic about doing it. But at this point, the story gets a little bizarre, if it's not bizarre already. He noticed a large glass cube-shaped object, which he went inside with the alien, who introduced himself as also one. Said he suddenly found himself strapped down to a chair and a device was put on his head. Then he noticed a group of 5 elk inside the cube. They were being held in a separate compartment. He said the cube took off, and it wasn't long before Higdon was looking down at another planet. Certainly wasn't the Earth. The cube landed near a tall, illuminated space tower, which had an umbrella-like structure he later described. Higdon said he was transferred to another box-like structure where he came upon other humans, including an 11-year-old girl, 2 teenage girls, a 12-year-old blonde girl, and a teenage couple, and a 50-year-old man. The alien came along and put Higdon near to a glass shield, and after a while it was made known to him that he wasn't suitable for their purposes. Well, when he woke up, he found he was lying at the bottom of a ravine, having fallen and banged his head. He managed to get back to his truck, which is by now about 3 miles away from where he originally parked it, and partially bogged down in a mud-filled sinkhole. The truck and Higdon later found by the local sheriff. The truck was completely surrounded by trees, and there was no way the vehicle could have been driven to that location. And there were no wheel tracks leading to the truck. Higdon was taken to a hospital suffering from nervous exhaustion and a bloodshot eye. When he recovered, he told his remarkable story, which by any stretch of the imagination appears to be so weird it just might actually be true. So what does it mean if that tale is true? How do beings from other worlds or dimensions manage to jump through space? Well, we talked about wormholes as proposed by Albert Einstein, but creating these would require massive amounts of energy. Another way of skipping through the space-time continuum might be to make use of magnetic fields. When the Voyager 1 space probe finally left our solar system, it passed a point where the sun's gravitational field finally dissipated. Every scientist found that the magnetic sphere of the sun extended outwards. In fact, very weak magnetic fields have been found to connect galaxies. Scientists have detected magnetic fields in space that have stretched as far as 12 million light years. So it could be that extraterrestrials might use these magnetic pathways to traverse huge distances, maybe by collapsing space-time. Magnetism or possibly gravity could be a key to entering other dimensions. Well, our next pathway to explore deals with what's known as alien shapeshifters. A lot of stories about that. This isn't to be confused with anything normal, I guess you could say. The subtle clue might just be in the name, something which is able to shift its shape to take on another shape or identity or form. Ancient folklore is full of stories relating to mysterious creatures able to undergo physical transformations. These tales include all the usual suspects, including good old-fashioned werewolves, right through to vampires and numerous other demons. But in a modern context, we might also include aliens and their spaceship or drones, which are not only capable of changing shape, but also able to become invisible or perhaps we should say cloaked. Precisely how UFOs pull this magic off remains a closely guarded secret, but it must involve sophisticated technologies that are currently outside of human comprehension. Nevertheless, we have to understand that seeing and actually believing, because it appears extraterrestrials not only have the ability to change shape, they can interfere with our take on reality, possibly through telepathy. In essence, able to make us see whatever or whoever they want us to see. It's not so much shape-shifting and more like mind-shifting. The notion that shape-shifting entities exist is supported by stories such as those emanating from the infamous Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. That ranch acquired its somewhat sinister name because of Indian folklore tales of an evil witch type of creature allegedly able to take on the form of an animal, usually a wolf or a coyote. Before the Shermans bought the place, the ranch had been unoccupied for 7 years, and for, quite frankly, good reasons. Shermans bought the ranch at a knockdown price of $200,000 in 1994. They had absolutely no idea what was about to unfold over the next 2 years. They intended to breed cattle and were forced to vacate the place due to severe personal stress. That stress resulted from multiple strange paranormal events, which involved numerous UFOs and orbs and possibly drone-like creatures, and of course, a lot of unexplained animal mutilations. Right from the start, there was evidence that something strange had been going on when they moved in. Skinwalker Ranch comprises at least 3 separate homesteads, 2 of which are dilapidated shacks. As far as the principal homestead is concerned, the Shermans found that the doors were adorned with strong bolts, both on the outside and the inside. Strong metal stakes with heavy chains were found situated immediately outside the main doors of the property. These chains are obviously used to tether large guard dogs. So the question becomes, why would you need such draconian measures? And more puzzling, specific instructions were left from the previous owners to the effect that no digging should take place on the property, which may have been a clue as to the source of the paranormal activity. Although the Skinwalker Ranch appears to become a UFO hotspot in the 50s, really hit the headlines after the Shermans moved in. And they didn't last long. Having lost 20% of their cattle and having suffered from numerous stressful events, they sold up and moved out in 1996. After that, the ranch was purchased by a mysterious guy named Robert Bigelow. And this is where the Skinwalker Ranch story gets extremely interesting, because Robert T. Bigelow's company, which is called Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, was more or less bankrolled by the Pentagon to investigate UFO activity at the ranch. Wouldn't be an exaggeration to say the Skinwalker Ranch was or is the epicenter of paranormal activity, which even to this day has not been adequately explained. We can categorize the paranormal phenomena as consisting of poltergeist activity, UFOs, orbs, invisible creatures, exotic animals, shadow people, and cattle abduction and cattle mutilation. The Shermans were initially terrorized by poltergeist activity. It manifested itself by moving objects around their house. In the first case, Gwen Sherman had arrived home after a trip to the grocery store, took the grocery bags into her kitchen and unpacked them. When she came back, not only were the groceries repacked, the bags were put back inside the car. And she experienced other poltergeist activity. This time, before stepping into the shower, she put a towel and a hairbrush on a chair. When she emerged from the shower, the objects were put back in her bedroom. Tom Sherman also experienced poltergeist activity. He described how one day he was putting up a fence. Busy digging holes for fence posts, he put down the post digger. When he went to pick it back up, the tool had vanished from his side. After a search, he found the post hole diggers had been put up high up in a tree several yards away. It appears he hadn't heeded the warning from the previous owner not to dig in the soil. The larger objects were also moved, and this included 4 of Tom Sherman's prize bulls. Now, the bulls are normally housed inside a robust iron fence corral. As Tom Sherman and his wife were driving by the corral, Tom mentioned that if anything happened to their prize bulls, they'd be done for financially. Well, when they got back to the ranch, they got something of a shock because the corral was empty. The corral gate was still padlocked. He then realized that some forester agents had managed to cram all 4 of the bulls inside a metal container to the side of the corral. And such a maneuver might be impossible, as the bulls didn't like to be huddled together. But there they were, all crammed inside the container as if by magic. He recollected that the bulls were in a state of trance when he went to release them. He also noticed a corral iron railings have become highly magnetized, suggesting whatever was responsible for shoving the bulls inside the trailer emitted powerful magnetic fields. Might assume that these events are due to so-called poltergeist activities, but there's one other explanation. Some hidden or cloaked things was playing mind games with the Shermans. This was a dubbed precog, or a type of precognition, as if unseen entities are able to read their thoughts. Secondly, UFOs made numerous appearances on or around the Skinwalker Ranch. In fact, it appears the entire Utah Ouray Basin is one big UFO hotspot. Sometimes these UFOs would appear at night and light up the fields with powerful beams. Shermans reportedly saw many unexplained objects. Some were 30 feet long and hovered 20 feet off the ground. Gwen had a close encounter with what was described as a large black triangular UFO. It hovered above her car and totally freaked her out. In a panic, she drove to the ranch and locked herself inside. She said the craft landed and a 7-foot-tall humanoid got out and walked around the place. When Tom got back from a trip, he searched the grounds for evidence and came across a footprint 18 inches long. Now, that's a good-sized foot, folks. Other weird objects seen hovering over the ranch, one described as being shaped like a refrigerator. On other occasions, the Shermans told of how they could hear voices talking just 10 feet above their heads. These voices were coming from invisible objects in a strange, unrecognizable language. Once again, this militates toward the notion that maybe the Shermans were being secretly observed or studied by extraterrestrials. And to this end, the Shermans invariably felt like something or somebody was watching them. Thirdly, the Shermans were terrorized by hostile orbs. One evening in May of 1996, Tom Sherman was sitting outside on the veranda with his 3 dogs when his 3 dogs began to bark. He spotted a blue orb zigzagging about in a field near his ranch house. He described the orb as containing a blue swirling liquid which made nearby electro equipment go haywire. Suddenly his dogs took off in pursuit of the Mr. Orb, which was the size of a basketball. He said every time a dog got within striking distance of the orb, it took evasive action. It was obvious that the thing was under some kind of intelligent control. And then something very sinister transpired. The orb began to move away from the ranch house, and the dogs ran after it. Sherman told him how the orb was actually luring the dogs away from the ranch house. He said the orb hovered over some thick brush into which the 3 dogs disappeared. And then he heard several blood-curdling yelps. The dogs fell silent and never came back when they were called. He wanted to go find his dogs, but it was dark, so he thought better of it. Went looking for his dogs the next day, and that's when he made a gruesome discovery. The remains of his dogs lay among burnt vegetation, and they were hardly recognizable. They'd been reduced to greasy black lumps. He said the dogs had been incinerated, possibly, he thought, by that blue orb, reminiscent of what happened to a horse that had been microwaved to death by an orb. The orbs were just suddenly appeared from nowhere or from transient portals, which usually took the form of bright orange globes. Orbs would fly around as if searching for something, and then they would vanish. They sometimes appeared among cattle and caused mayhem. Most unnerving thing that happened on the ranch was the appearance of a massive wolf. One evening, Tom Sherman was standing outside the ranch house with his wife, Gwen, when they spotted a strange-looking animal in a nearby field. The animal certainly wasn't what it appeared to be, and as they watched in their amazement, this large wolf got closer and closer. And astonishingly, this huge, fearless wolf, which was described as being 3 to 4 times bigger than a regular wolf, came right up to Tom and Gwen, brushed up against Gwen's leg, and allowed the couple to pet it as if it were a member of the family. There was some discussion as to whether they might actually adopt that friendly wolf as a pet. Now, this display of tameness and unnerving affection turned out to be short-lived. Wolf turned away from the couple and darted toward a corral holding some cattle. Wolf then clamped its powerful jaws on the snout of a young calf and tried to pull it through the bars. Calf was in obvious pain, so Tom hit the attacking wolf over the head with a baseball bat to try and make it release the screaming calf. When that didn't work, he shot the wolf at point-blank range with a .357 Magnum. The wolf appeared completely unfazed and continued to bite the calf. So Tom shot the creature once more with the large carabel handgun. Still, the wolf held the calf tightly in its jaws. He said he shot the wolf 5 more times with his hunting rifle, found that the wolf let go. Oddly enough, he said later, the bullets didn't cause any bleeding, and the animal simply walked away across the field and disappeared into the brush. He said he'd gotten a chunk of the wolf's fur and it smelled of rotting flesh. That was the only sign that he'd shot the creature several times. Intrigued, he followed the wolf's tracks. Then he got another surprise. He got to a point where the footprints just vanished, as something had taken it up into the air. Well, you have to admit that's a weird story, to say the least. If it's true, then either the wolf was actually bulletproof or it wasn't a wolf at all. Might have been an alien drone, was disguised as a wolf, possibly using skin obtained from a cow or some other animal. If it was a remotely controlled alien drone, it may have been a test of human reactions and defenses against a physical attack. May also have been an attempt to assess the effects of bullets on their drone technology. Their explanation could have been that the wolf was so large that it was able to take the bullet in its stride, or it could have died someplace else from internal bleeding. And there are a number of instances of shape-shifting UFOs. One of the most recent examples was captured in the skies above the English University town of Cambridge. In a film, a bright object is seen in the night sky. The object appears to change shape into a classic flying saucer before flying off. However, while journalists insist that this is absolute proof that we're being visited by extraterrestrials, the video is not of very good quality, and it's hard to really make things out. Certainly no shortage of stories connecting UFO activity or extraterrestrials with shape-shifting creatures. One remarkable story involves an encounter with a massive owl. A tale of how one day a woman was out walking in the hills surrounding Loch Ness in Scotland. Sunny day in July 2017. Jeannie Savoy was walking with her 2 dogs, who she said later were named Tonto and Pigeon. Suddenly, both dogs stopped in their tracks, began to cower at her feet. At first, she thought they might have been hiding from an eagle, that they may have been picked up the scent of a fox or a wildcat, but then she caught sight of a strange, childlike figure perched on a rock. When he realized they'd been seen, this thin figure jumped down from the rock. It was evident it wasn't a child. She realized the creature wasn't even human. It was in every respect identical to what ufologists refer to as a gray. 3 feet tall with an oversized bald head, long arms, and large cat-like eyes. Then something truly remarkable occurred. The aliens instantly transformed into a giant owl, which she said was larger than a man. She described how it launched into the sky without flapping its wings and traveled across the waters of the loch and disappeared into the forest. There's several possible explanations for this bizarre encounter. Number 1, it could never actually have happened. She could have encountered an alien shapeshifter, or she was suffering from hallucination. It's also possible the alien made the woman think she'd encountered a man-sized owl by installing a fake screen image in her mind. To date, there have been no other sightings of grays or giant owls around Loch Ness. At least none have been reported. Giant owl may have been spotted elsewhere throughout England. One standout case is the so-called Owl Man of Cornwall. Reports of a creature fitting this description date back to the mid-1970s. That's what the picture appears like until you dig a little deeper. And then you'll find this phenomenon actually dates back to 1926. It was then that a local newspaper, the Echo, carried an article detailing the story of how 2 young boys had been attacked by a strange hybrid. So-called Cornish Owl Man then made another appearance April 18, 1976. Appearance coincided with one of the most extreme weather events in UK meteorological records, when the country suffered a heat wave or a drought, which saw reservoirs and rivers dry up. At that time, 2 young girls named Vicky and June were vacationing with their parents not far from the small village of Monan Smith, which is near the Falmouth in Cornwall. Teenagers described what could be decided that it would be a good idea to venture out of the village, so they walked to the remote church, which is about a mile away. One long before they were terrorized by a large bird man that was flying, or rather hovering around the church steeple. Girls told how the creature took off and revealed large claws. One of the girls later made a rough sketch of the creature. If it looked like that, it was a weird one to be sure. 2 things jump out at you at this point. First, the 13th century church steeple didn't actually have a steeple or a spire as such, and secondly, the girl made the sketch certainly was not a Rembrandt by any means. Yeah, nevertheless, the two girls were sufficiently freaked out by their encounter that their parents cut short the vacation. The story has legs, though, because they all made another appearance in early August of 1978. On this occasion, two French girls were camping in the woods near the Malden Church. One night, shortly after climbing into their sleeping bags, they became aware of an ominous hissing sound that echoed through the woods. Well, they were too afraid to venture outside their camp to investigate the blood-curdling shrieks. Next day, though, shortly after breakfast, caught sight of a huge birdman they said had very large and wide glowing red eyes. Also, he's very reminiscent of the Mothman that terrorized Point Pleasant, Virginia. There's certainly a number of parallels. John Keel did a lot of write-ups about the Mothman. Unfortunately, no hard evidence, or such as photographs, to back up eyewitness accounts of the Owlman. And as far as it can be determined, no coincidental reports of associated UFO activity or sightings of gray aliens also exist. So it's anybody's guess of what these girls saw way back in 1976 and 78. Owlman measures in an unusually large owl. But the Owlman did turn up again in 1989. On that occasion, a young couple saw that standing upright on a thick branch in a tree. Sighting took place about 9:30 in the evening. The eyewitnesses, naming the man and his girlfriend, said they stood 5 feet tall, was covered in brown-gray feathers, and had black claws and glowing eyes. Then in 1995, a young American woman saw it. This lady, who was a marine biologist by training, said it was a vision straight out of hell. She'd been walking near the Malden Church at about 9:30 in the evening when the creature flew right at her. Gave a similar description, saying it had gray-silver in color and had large pencil-like claws and glowing red eyes. The Cornish Owlman has something in common with the Mothman at Point Pleasant. It also appears to be drawn to women or young girls. Mothman was attracted to structures that contained iron, such as bridges. Also came to light that the Mothman was drawn to menstruating girls, so this again militates toward the notion that it would seem to like iron, such as in blood. All the sightings of the Owlman in Cornwall have involved encounters with young females, so there's common ground there. Nobody's come up with any explanation as to why the Malden Church and its environment has been selected as a place to be haunted by the Owlman. There is evidence the church is built on a so-called ley line. Also, it's said that witches used to carry out devil worship in the nearby woods. Of course, people believe the Owlman is connected with the wave of UFOs, which descended on Cornwall in the 70s, and might be a drone that got left behind. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be talking about more strange things in tomorrow's show. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great evening.